All right, now we're in the middle of chapter 8. And we've just gone through the first two plagues. Now 8 verse 16, the plagues of these are the gnats. So the third plague. Then Yahweh said to Moses, so this should be the one without any preparation, say to Aaron, so again we still have Moses sending Aaron. Aaron is his prophet. Say to Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the earth, so that it may become gnats throughout the whole land of Egypt. And they did so. Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff. He struck the dust, the dirt of the ground. Gnats came on humans and animals alike. All the dust of the earth turned into gnats throughout the whole land of Egypt. The magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts. They could not. There were gnats on both humans and animals, and the magicians said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. Now it also could be translated, this is the finger of a God. But basically what they're doing is conceding, well, there is something at work here, and it's beyond what we are. So it's not necessarily the big concession. They will make that one in a while. But what we do see is, notice that they're breaking now with Pharaoh, because the very next sentence, but Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them, just as Yahweh had said. Now, gnats is what... Does anybody have a different English translation than gnats? Robert Alter, who is my favorite contemporary writer, he's a professor, I believe he's now at Princeton, he used to be at Cal Berkeley, and has written beautiful translations of the whole of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. If you're interested in that, that's the best place I can think of to go if you'd like to buy a big book and just read along with your Bible reading. It's one of those books there, the Bible translations at the top, about this much of the page. At the bottom of the page is Robert Alter making little comments on, and he is a Jew. He's written books on the art of biblical poetry, and really has broken open for a whole generation of people an understanding of the beautiful craftsmanship that has gone into all of the historical stories of the Old Testament. Anyway, Alter says that this word kanim or kanam, kanim would be the plural of it, kanim, he says, well, it can be translated gnats. He says most people choose that. It could also be translated mosquitoes, but he says the basic post-biblical translation of it is, and I like this a lot better, he says should be translated lice. Now, isn't that better as a plague? That's better than just gnats. You know, we know gnats, and well, some of us know lice too, but you know, if you have kids, there's always a chance, you know. What? Wait, come here, young man. Where'd you get that? You know. But so, yeah, he says this ought to be lice, and I really like that, you know, because that's just more creepy. And that's really the point, he says. And particularly for these now middle 3, he says, they ought to be creepy. And the point is, the lice are coming from the dirt. He just struck the dirt. So he struck the water up here. Now he struck the dirt. Aaron has. And so... now the lice have come up. And notice that this one is, as I said, it's just disgusting. The first one, the blood, is of course very ominous. And in a way it makes a little frame. If we have the 10th one down here, the death of the firstborn, held off by blood, well then this becomes a little frame for all 10 of them, that they start with the portent of all the water turning to blood, and then of course the death of the firstborn will strike throughout the whole of the land, and the people will be ransomed only by the blood of the Lamb that's applied to their doorposts. So anyway, the one in number 10 are extremely ominous. But these two, he says, and they kind of show the power of God, but they also show a kind of felicity in God's tormenting the Egyptians. God also is interested in just saying, well, that's what I can do. So this is kind of God juggling with the creation. Now, the frogs came from the water. The gnats or lice come from the earth, the dirt. Yeah, and then the next ones will come from, so you have water, dirt, and the flies, the stingy flies will, so to speak, come from the air. So you have God just manipulating all the elements and saying, hey, this is easy for me. I can juggle this behind my back. And so that's what God is doing. So we've completed the first triad now. And as we move through, the other progress is that they become increasingly attacking of particularly the people and animals, notice here. Instead of just nuisance things, just yicky things, now we move to things that are actively sort of assaulting both people and animals. By the time we get to here, we have active, the worst natural portents and signs, and even assaults on on the Egyptians. And so anyway, let's go on. So number 4, the flies, or I think horse flies is better, because it's not just flies. Then Yahweh said to Moses, verse 20, 8 verse 20, rise early in the morning. So notice, 4th one, we're starting a new triad. Get up early in the morning, Moses. Present yourself before Pharaoh as he goes out to the water. So again, catch him when he's out there, and say to him, thus says Yahweh. But notice now, this is Moses speaking. Notice he doesn't say, send Aaron. So we see Moses grow up and grow into his role as God's man and as the first of the great prophets. He is the prophet, and that's how the Jews will think of him ever after. So he's now growing into that role where he will be the one who gives God's words, and we'll see that. And we see not only his growing as a spokesman, we see kind of his increasing sense of himself. We see him begin to kind of taunt and toy with the Pharaoh himself, with the things that he says to him. Thus says Yahweh, let my people go. Literally, send them out so they may worship me. And here's that pun, verse 21. If you will not send my people out, I don't know why we don't have this in English, but because it's the main thing throughout all of here. For if you will not send my people out, I will send swarms of flies in on you. You won't send them out, I will send these things in. On you, on your officials, and your people, and into your houses. So notice we've had the frogs, but this is now attacking in a different way, upon your very person. And the houses of the Egyptians shall be filled with swarms of flies. So also the land where they live. But on that day, and now here's something completely new with the 4th one, I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people live, so that no swarms of flies shall be there, that you may know that I, Yahweh, am in this land. Thus I will make a distinction, and hold on to that word, distinction, between my people and your people. This sign shall appear tomorrow. Yahweh did so, and great swarms of flies came into the house of Pharaoh and into his officials' houses. In all of Egypt the land was ruined because of the flies. So get up early. We're starting the next triad. If you won't send my people off, I'll send these things in to you. The flies, as I said, the stinging fly, we need to think of the pain of them. But now the really new thing, we haven't even heard this word before. I'll set apart the land of Goshen. Now what is that? Well, what do you surmise from the context? It's a special what? Suburb or encampment or settlement where the Israelite slaves live. Yeah. This is the first time we see this. It is back in, this name for a part of, is back in Genesis. You can just write this down, 46:34. Now just to see, that's where the name appears and that tells us. But so, yeah, now we see this as the special place. And of course, in the things that are going to come up, in the future things, the fact that my people live in a suburb will be the special thing. And maybe, I don't know, is this how we think of suburbs or how we shouldn't think of suburbs? Anyway, because they live in the suburbs, they'll be protected. So I guess that is how we think of them. And they live in Goshen. Of course, it's not a suburb. It's a camp. It's their special poverty village where they live. But so here's one thing, and God will start to increasingly say this. I'm setting apart my people, and now the plagues that come, we'll start to see. This happened here. It didn't happen at all in Goshen. And even things that are incredible. How could there be darkness over the whole land, and yet there was light in Goshen? And so on. How could the locusts eat up every single thing that was outside anywhere and even fill the houses in Egypt but not in Goshen? The same thing with the hail. So we'll see these things. God makes a separation. And then that little word I told you to hold on to. I will make a distinction. Very interesting. The Hebrew word there is padut. P-E-D-U-T. Padut is the regular Hebrew word for ransom. God doesn't just say, I'll make a distinction between my people and yours. He says, I'll make a ransom for my people. And of course, that's intentionally, isn't it, pointing on to, of course, you and I pointed all the way to Jesus, but he's pointing it to the salvation of the Exodus. I will make a salvation, a redemption. It could also be translated redeem. Padut is the regular word for redeeming. I will make a redemption for my people. So they don't even know what that means yet, but we do as readers, and authors put that word in there to point to the climax of the plagues and, of course, the death of the firstborn as the ransoming distinction God makes now about his people. All right, verse 25. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, go sacrifice to your God within the land. Okay, there's another little concession. But Moses said it wouldn't be right to do so, meaning to stay in Egypt. For the sacrifices that we offer to Yahweh our God are offensive to the Egyptians. If we offer in the sight of the Egyptians sacrifices that are offensive to them, won't they stone us? You see, if we sacrifice our animals and do our rituals that God has given to us, those things, the Egyptians will go, what are you doing? You're blaspheming. That's our God, or whatever they're using in their worship. So Moses just pointing out to the Pharaoh, you don't really mean that, and it wouldn't really accomplish any purpose. Verse 27, we must go a 3 days journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to Yahweh our God as he commands us. So Pharaoh said, I'll let you go to sacrifice to Yahweh your God in the wilderness, provided, notice again, just a niggling little concession, provided you don't go very far away. Pray for me. It's great, those two things coming together. Okay, I'll let you do this. Go a little itchy bit and pray for me. You know, see, don't let me keep getting whacked by God here. Then Moses said, but notice how the kind of straightforwardness of Moses. As soon as I leave you, I will pray to Yahweh that the swarms of flies may depart you tomorrow from Pharaoh. Yeah, that's what we should have added. You know, what you should add in your little picture is, I'll let you go to sacrifice if you just go a little bitty way and pray for me. No. You got to have that slap, you know. He's getting bit by horse flies. I will pray to Yahweh that the swarms of flies may depart tomorrow from Pharaoh, from his officials and his people. But now notice how the growth in Moses' ego. Only don't let Pharaoh deal falsely again. Literally, don't let him try to make a mockery of this by not letting the people go to sacrifice to Yahweh. Of course, that's exactly what he's going to do. So Moses went out from Pharaoh. He prayed to the Lord, just what he'd said he was going to do. And Yahweh did as Moses asked. He removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, his officials, and his people. Not one remained, but Pharaoh, now notice, he's the actor here, hardened his heart this time also, and he wouldn't let the people go. Okay, chapter 9. Then Yahweh said to Moses, and now we're moving on to the fifth plague. Yahweh said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say to him, thus says Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go, so they may worship me. If you refuse to send them out and still hold on, the hand of the Lord, now here, this is a different thing. The hand of the Lord, literally, I will be against your livestock. Robert Alter points this out. He says in Hebrew, it's not rendered in our English translation, Yahweh is making a very, he says, even a terrific pun on his own name. Yahweh's name is, of course, I am who I am. It's also, I will be who I will be. He says, if you won't let my people go, I will Yahweh against your livestock. In other words, I will set myself, I will be, literally, myself, I'll be myself against your livestock in the field. The horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds, the flocks. But Yahweh will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and those of Egypt, so that nothing shall die of all that belongs to the Israelites. Yahweh set a time, saying, tomorrow Yahweh will do this thing in the land. And on the next day Yahweh did so. All the livestock of the Egyptians died. All the livestock of the Israelites, not one died. Pharaoh inquired and found that not one of the livestock of the Israelites was dead. So see, Pharaoh's starting to get it, but he's also able to refuse it. But the heart of the Pharaoh was hardened. He would not let the people go. Now the plague of the livestock and Yahweh, and this thing again now coming from the sky, and probably with the flies as well. There was a sky goddess called Hathor, who is was depicted as a cow. Oh, and I forgot to say back with this one. I'm sorry to say this, ladies, but the one of the frogs coming up, one of the main goddesses of the Egyptians, was a figure depicted with her name was Heket, H-E-K-E-T or H-E-Q-E-T, Heket. And Heket was depicted as a woman's body with a frog's head. And this was her job. She was the goddess of childbirth. So the frogs coming up and infesting everywhere, again, is God saying, you know, you think that you've sort of harnessed this goddess Heket for the right things. But it also then, you see, remember the frogs coming out of the river, the midwife goddess basically, and so it's a kind of a little retribution with the frogs of against, well, remember when you tried to use the midwives to kill our children in the river. So, but anyway, now back to the livestock. But the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, 9 verse 7. He wouldn't let the people go. So there's the shortest one, the livestock. Now right on, we jump right into the last one, the boils. Then Yahweh said to Moses, take, and this one's an odd one, a lot of people don't know what to do with this, take handfuls of soot from the kiln. So a baking industrial oven. From the kiln, and let Moses throw it in the air in the sight of Pharaoh. Of course, it shatters into dust. It shall become fine dust all over the land of Egypt, and shall cause festering boils on humans and animals throughout the whole land of Egypt. So they took soot from the kiln and stood before Pharaoh. Moses and Aaron, Moses threw it in the air. It caused festering boils on humans and errands and animals. The magicians could not stand before or in front of Moses because of the boils. The boils afflicted the magicians as well as all the Egyptians. So we've just seen them kind of standing by helplessly and haplessly, but now they say, this is it. We can't take this. Verse 12, but Yahweh hardened. Now notice the activity. So now with number 6, we go from Pharaoh hardened his heart was hardened, to now everyone that we read will be, this is why I hardened your heart. I did it. And he would not listen, just as Yahweh had spoken to Moses. About the kiln, this Italian, Umberto Cassuto, says, and he's the person who seems to have the most reasonable suggestion, he says, well, what's the kiln? What is that in Israel's history? What have they been doing for 400 years? They've been making bricks. And then what? And then firing them, of course, in the oven. So the kiln is the brick-making oven of their cruelty, of their slavery, of their oppression. So when Moses now uses this as a kind of a strike back against Pharaoh and his whole nation, then here's a retribution for what they've had to do. It's a kind of poetic justice, says Cassuto. All right, 9 verse 13. Now the plague of the hail, the 7th plague. Then Yahweh said to Moses, and now notice we're at the last, and so these are all going to be the worst, leading up to the 10th, the death of the firstborn. But so number 7, we're starting over. So again, this is, remember, morning time and then going in front of the Pharaoh and then without warning. Then Yahweh said to Moses, rise up early in the morning, present yourself before Pharaoh, and say to him, thus says Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go so that they may worship me. So we've heard that every time. For this time I will send all my plagues upon you yourself, and upon your officials, literally into your heart. I will send them to your heart, upon your officials and upon your people, so that you may know that there is no one like me in all the earth. So now Yahweh's spilling all the beans. This is why I've been doing all of this stuff, that you may know there is no one like me in all the earth. So in effect, too, he's saying, so that the whole world will hear this about me, will know this about me as well. This is my advertising, my blast I'm sending out about myself to the whole earth. 15, for by now I could have stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, which of course is one question we have, which Moses had from the very first. Why are you sending me? Why don't you just go down there and wipe out the Pharaoh and all his army? So here's God's reply. I could have stretched out my hand and struck you and all your people with pestilence. You would have been cut off from the earth. I could have killed you, in other words. But this is why I have let you live. And here's the answer: to show you my power, to make my name resound through all the earth. So this is, in the Exodus story, the equivalent of the end of Job's story. Job keeps saying, this is awful, God. I've got to see you face to face. I've got to talk to you. And all his friends say, no, you don't need to talk to God. You know all the rules. Just keep the rules. And Job says, no, this is way beyond. I have got to talk to God. How this could happen. And God's answer is, Job, I'm God, and you are not. Well, basically, this is Yahweh saying this to the whole company, Moses and to the Pharaoh. I am Yahweh, and the whole earth will know this, will see this, will recognize, acknowledge this fact. Because I made the earth. I made everything and everybody that's on it. So that's what sets the whole world in order, is when everyone gets in line with that. And so I've done all these things just to show you, yes, I'm the God not just of the Israelites, not just of these poor slaves. I'm not the bargain basement God they dragged up out of somewhere that got thrown away by someone else. I'm the God who made the whole thing. And I have chosen them. And I'm going to, in choosing them, I've taken the earth's worst example in order to show everybody else, you see, that it's only me that can do this work and can make a people for myself. This is why I let you live, to show you my power, to make my name resound through all the earth. You, Pharaoh, are still exalting yourself against my people. You won't let them go. Tomorrow at this time I will cause the heaviest hail to fall, and notice this words, the hyperbole, the heaviest hail that has ever fallen in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. The Egyptians are so proud of their history. We've done it, seen it all before. And so God says, nobody who's ever been in Egypt ever saw this at any time. That because I am me and there's nothing else before me. Verse 19, and here's the pun, shalach, send and have your livestock and everything you have in the open field brought to a secure place. Every human or animal that is in the open field and is not brought under shelter will die when the hail comes down upon them. Now the ancient Jewish rabbis were so happy about this verse, you see, because God has just said, I'm iron-fisted, I can do whatever the heck I want. Then the rabbi said, but look how nice he is. He says, and now get your little animal, put it under the shed there so it doesn't get killed. Come on, what are you, stupid? So then the rabbi said, still, see, we have a God of mercy. We have a kind God here. Come on now. Then this is who he is. Let's get on track with him. Verse 20, those officials of Pharaoh who feared the word of the Lord, of Yahweh, hurried their slaves and livestock off to a secure place. Those who did not, in other words, they were still saying, oh, Pharaoh's our guy, we're hanging with him, even though it's 98-3 against us, 98-0 against us. Those who didn't regard the word of Yahweh, they left their slaves and their livestock in the open field. So the story says, now who's getting punished? Yahweh said to Moses, stretch out your hand. Notice, Aaron is just completely in the background now. Moses, stretch out your hand. It's just Moses, and when you see Moses, you are seeing Yahweh at work. Stretch out your hand toward heaven, so that hail may fall on the whole land of Egypt, on humans and animals and all the plants in the field in the land of Egypt. Moses stretched out his staff. And now we don't see Aaron's staff at all, just Moses. He stretched it out toward heaven. Yahweh sent thunder and hail, and fire came down on the earth. And Yahweh rained hail on the land of Egypt. There was hail with fire flashing continually in the midst of it. Such heavy hail as has never fallen in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. So again, that reckoning, how old are you, Egypt? Who cares? I'm Yahweh. The hail struck down everything that was in the open field throughout all the land of Egypt, both human and animal. The hail also struck down all the plants of the field and shattered every tree in the field. Only in the land of Goshen, and now we know what that means, where the Israelites were, there was no hail. So now, the last thing we've seen, dirt and water and sky, but now Yahweh attacks straight from heaven. No intermediaries, just Moses, you stretch out your hand and boom, here I come. And of course, the hail and thunder and lightning has always been a sign not only of God, but of God's judgment. And all throughout the prophets, when you have signs or talk or precursors of coming judgment, hail, thunder, lightning, those falling from heaven, those are the signs of God's judgment coming. Verse 27, then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said to them, this time I have sinned. Now notice this presumption. This time I've sinned. You see, all the rest of that time, I was being Pharaoh. I can do anything I want. Okay, this time I have sinned. Let's start right there, So now he's his own comedian. This time I think I have sinned. Yahweh's in the right. I and my people are in the wrong. Pray to Yahweh. Enough of God's thunder and hail. Now that's the real part. And he might still be slapping himself for flies or whatever. I will let you go. You need stay no longer. Moses said to him, as soon as I've gone out of the city, I'll stretch out my hands to Yahweh. The thunder will cease. There will be no more hail, so that you may know the earth is Yahweh's. But as for you and your officials, now notice how brave Moses has gotten. But as for you, I know that you don't yet fear Yahweh God. A little parenthesis. Now the flax and the barley were ruined, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was in bud, but the wheat and the spelt were not ruined, for they are late in coming up. So what does the flax mean? Well, it's their clothing, the linen. And what does the barley mean? Well, it means bread, and it means beer. So that tells you what a great tragedy it was. We lost the beer and the bread. But so in the ancient world, that's a lot. That means a lot. So verse 33, so Moses left Pharaoh. He went out of the city and he stretched out his hands to Yahweh. Then the thunder and the hail ceased, and the rain no longer poured down on the earth. But when Pharaoh saw, oh, it looks like it's passing on, the rain and the hail and the thunder had ceased, he sinned once more and hardened his heart, he and his officials. So the heart of Pharaoh was hardened. He would not let the Israelites go, just as Yahweh had spoken through Moses. All right, chapter 10. Then Yahweh said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart, the heart of his officials, in order that I may show these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I made fools of the Egyptians, what signs I've done among them, so that you may know that I am Yahweh. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, and they said to him, thus says Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? God's getting impatient. Let my people go so that they may worship me. If you refuse to send my people out, tomorrow I will send locusts into your country. They shall cover the surface of the land so that no one will be able to see the land. They'll devour the last remnant left you after the hail. You see, so there was stuff there, but even that'll be gone. And they shall devour every tree of yours that grows in the field. They shall fill your houses and the houses of your officials and of all the Egyptians, something that neither your parents nor your grandparents have seen from the day they came on earth to this day. Then he turned and went out from Pharaoh. And notice the mirroring, so that you may tell your children and grandchildren and your parents and grandparents, they have never seen anything like this. So the mirroring of the... but also notice God has said, I'm going to do this to you, Pharaoh, so that the whole earth will know I am Yahweh. And now he says, that covers the whole world, you see. But now what about down through the dimension of time? I'm doing what I'm doing now so that you will tell your children and your grandchildren. So you see, it's out across the earth, but it's also now down through the ages. This story will always be told, he says. When I bring the locusts, and they complete the devastation that the others didn't. Verse 7, let's charge on to the end. Pharaoh's officials said to him, how long shall this fellow be a snare to us? Now notice, remember, Yahweh said, how long will you keep opposing me? Now Pharaoh's own men say to him, he's got a point. How long will you keep this thing up? will this, but they insult Moses instead, because they still work for the Pharaoh. How long shall this fellow be a snare to us? Let the people go, that they may worship Yahweh their God. Don't you yet understand that Egypt is ruined? So in effect, they turn against Pharaoh. So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, go, worship Yahweh your God. But he can't stop prevaricating. But which ones are to go? Moses said, we'll go with our young and our old. We'll go with our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and our herds. In other words, all of us, because we have heard we have the Lord's festival to celebrate. And he said to them, Yahweh indeed will be with you if I ever let your little ones go with you. You see, that's my ace in the hole. Plainly, you have some evil purpose in mind. No, never. Your men may go and worship Yahweh. That's what you're asking. They were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. Then Yahweh said to Moses, stretch your hand out over the land of Egypt, so the locusts may come upon it and eat every plant in the land, all the hail that was, all that the hail has left. So Moses stretched out his hand. The Lord brought on an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. Now here's a little. We're at the very end. We have a little preview of coming attractions. The east wind blowing all day and all night is going to be, of course, the source of the Exodus, of the parting of the Red Sea. So we're seeing now what God's going to do finally. The locusts came upon all the land of Egypt. They settled in the whole country. Such a dense swarm of locusts has never been seen before or ever shall be again. They covered the surface of the whole land. The land was black. They ate all the plants in the land, all the fruit of the trees. Nothing green was left, no tree, no plant in the field in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh hurriedly summoned Moses and Aaron and said, I have sinned against Yahweh your God and against you. Do forgive my sin just this once. Then pray to Yahweh your God that at least he remove this deadly thing from me. So he went out from Pharaoh and he prayed to Yahweh. The Lord changed the wind into a very strong west wind, lifting the locusts and drove them into the sea. Not a single locust was left. Verse 20, but the Lord, Yahweh, hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he wouldn't let the Israelites go. Okay, we're running to the end. Then Yahweh said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven so that there may be darkness over the land, a darkness that can be felt. Remember, the first thing that happened at creation was God saying, let there be light. What was he doing? He was overturning the chaos of darkness. So now the last of the plagues before that's it, the 10th plague, the last of these run-up plagues is the coming of a darkness that can be felt. So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven. There was dense darkness in all the land for 3 days. People couldn't see one another. 3 days. They couldn't move from where they were. But all the Israelites had light where they lived. Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, go worship Yahweh, only your flocks and your herds, even your children may go. But Moses said, you must also let us have sacrifices and burnt offerings. Our livestock must go with us, not a hoof shall be left behind. For we must choose some of them to worship Yahweh our God. We won't know what it is until we arrive there. But Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart. He was unwilling to let them go. Pharaoh said to him, get away from me. Take care you do not see my face again. On the day you see my face, you shall die. Moses said, just as you say, I will never see your face again. Now, of course, the Pharaoh, when he says that, thinks that he's pronouncing the ultimate penalty, the ultimate judgment on Moses. And of course, we know in the story, he's pronouncing the ultimate judgment on himself. If he doesn't see Moses anymore, he has no way to relate to Yahweh. He has no way to receive any of the real miracle in all of these terrible plagues has been that Yahweh is able to say, okay, I take that back now. I'll stop that now. When Pharaoh sends Moses away, he's also sending away his one source of recourse and connection to Yahweh. The last thing about I want to just leave you this, one of my favorite quotes that I think applies to the Pharaoh so much, Yahweh, and particularly about the progress that we see in him. Lewis says in one of his books, I think it's in Screwtape, but it might be in the Great Divorce. Lewis says, I believe that in the end, there will only be one sentence said at the end of every life. In the end, every person will either say, thy will be done. and God will say, at last. Or God will say, thy will be done, to all of those who have spent their lives and made their hearts choosing against Him. God will at the last, honoring our freedom, say, thy will be done. In The Great Divorce, he has a beautiful picture of this woman marching through heaven, and she's a woman that almost nobody has known upon earth from a fame standpoint. Everybody who ever met her fell in love with her, became a son or a daughter of her care, and her name is Sarah Green, and Sarah Smith from Gilder's Green, and as he watches her go by in this beautiful parade that's behind her, he looks and he says, but what about all those people who didn't make it here? And he says something like that, well, everyone who is here, who truly desires to be here, is here. And then he said, well, where are they? And he, of course, he's thinking, imagining hell, imagining Dante's hell. And he says, no, you know, a soul that has chosen against God is more like a stain on the universe. And you can see them around you. They're smaller than a crack or even a pinprick. The soul that has determined finally that it will be whatever it's made itself to be apart from God. We see the point is we're all made for God. So if we could be whatever we are apart from God, what would that be? And Lewis's answer is that would be less than nothing. It would be not even enough to take pity on. So anyway, so that's the long section here. And these plagues running up to the last one, and of course, every one of them is this drama. And why is it so long? The answer is because this is the story that the Jews have made and remade and crafted and carried with them to tell over and over and over. Why is there so much icky stuff in it? Because it's meant to be told to teenage boys. It's meant to be told to kids and to make them go, yeah, what's next, Daddy? It's meant not only to be told, it's meant to be retold. And then really for them to be, oh, that's even more delicious. Yeah, let's get to that next part. Yeah, tell me about those blood-sucking flies. Yeah, that's my favorite, you know. So anyway, that's why I think it's stretched out the way that it is. Let's close with prayer. Lord, thank you for this book. Thank you that it's so rich and deep. Thank you that it's so wonderful, that it is so awful in its beautiful telling of who you are and of what you have done, of the lengths that you are willing to go to in order to reclaim your people and to draw them and to draw us back to yourself and to make us your people. Help us as we go through this journey, through this book, to take our place among those people. Help us to learn lessons from those who have in every way resisted you and turned away from you. And help us to learn lessons from following and watching the growth of our brother Moses. Lord, we give you this time and thank you for the journey that we make together in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen.